Hi, I'm Jim McCann, founder of 1-800-Flowers. We created this podcast to share the wonderful people we get to interact with, we get to meet, we get to know, and most importantly, get to learn from. So I invite you to join us on this journey here on the Celebrations Chatter podcast. Well, thanks for coming in today. We have with us today Alison. Alison and Keita. Alison, of course, is the CEO of Comic Relief. Last name Moore, and I remember that because I told you when we chatted on the phone, I'm married to a Moore.
Yes, you are.
And they're like all over the place lately.
Apparently they are, I know. I have seen, actually, it was just in Switzerland, and there was, for family vacation, and there was a big storefront, and it said Moore on the front, and I was like, well,
those are my people.
There you go, exactly. I'll see what they have for me.
And I know who it was. I was chatting with a fellow Zoom call last week, and he's building a really interesting company, and he said, my wife is a media personality on CBS News, and so a little while later I said, well, who would that be? And he told me her name is Jessica Moore. And I said, oh, my wife and I, usually watch the late night on Sunday night, and she's the anchor. And I said, you and I have something in common, and he's a fellow, he's Indian. Ethnicity, and he said, what's that? I said, we're both married to Moors. He goes, oh, I didn't know that. But there's a lot of Moors around.
There's a lot there, seems to be, yeah.
So Alison, tell us about your career. I know a little bit about it, some interesting stops along the way. Tell me how it's evolved. Where'd you grow up?
Yeah, I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, from northern parents there. I was born in Huntington, Long Island. So around the Northeast, my mother's from upstate New York, but we moved when I was 6 years old down to Atlanta, and that's when I kind of consider my home.
You moved because of the street violence you were getting involved with in Huntington?
Yeah, in the North Shore of Long Island.
6 years old.
Yeah, it's crazy.
It's clear what was
happening. They had to get me out. My dad's job, he was a marine insurance broker and very specialized kind of thing, and so we moved around. He kind of headed up Southeast expansion, all the things back in the late 70s, early 80s. So I grew up there, and I went to the University of Georgia for school and majored in poli-sci, and thought I was going to hit the Capitol Hill.
Do they play football there?
You've heard it? Yeah. Small little shop of football right there. Yeah, exactly.
They've had a great several years here.
Oh, they have, I know. I will tell you, my father played football in college, and so when I went to Georgia, I just wasn't into big crowds and the big rah-rah thing. I cheered them from afar. My father said, all right, pick a game and we're coming up, And because he had played football, he thought maybe I would have a clue.
And where did he go?
He actually went to Kent State.
Oh, amazing.
So he only played for the first year, and he played all through high school. He was a big athlete in high school, but I think the college thing, he was just into a different scene. But so I picked tickets, William and Mary versus University of Georgia, and my dad was like, who picks this as a game? He's like, this is
a blowout.
Yeah, it was total blowout. He was like, this isn't even fun to watch. And I was like, sorry. Can we go out to lunch now? I know. I was like, we're going out to dinner, right? That was the greatest story. My brother, who's a huge football fan, he was like, that was embarrassing.
Beautiful school, though, William and Mary.
Oh, beautiful school. A
couple of nieces who went there.
Yeah, it's a great school. We just went on many college tours with my daughter coming into this coming year. So
I tell you, my two nieces absolutely loved it.
Oh, it's a great school.
Both of them met their husbands there.
Is that right?
One is married, one's to be married, and both Southern gentlemen from Virginia.
Nice, yeah.
Terrific young men. They're terrific young ladies, and then a couple of terrific young men.
It's great when that works out well, right? I know. We're excited. My daughter's going to Wash U in the fall.
Great school.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm just so proud of her. We are. She's just a bit of a meat grinder, that whole process, and she did a great job. But you want them to fly and do all the things. And
so, born with heritage on Long Island, Huntington, moved to Atlanta, Georgia, because your dad's in the marine insurance business. Go to Georgia, and then
major in poli-sci, and then think I'm going to go to the Hill right after that. And after a few revelations, existential revelations, decided that wasn't going to be the thing I wanted to do, and I ended up through a friend of a friend at the lowest level job at Turner Broadcasting in Atlanta. And just starting from that space. And I really did
Great time to be there. So go-go days.
Yeah, 1992. So very right at the consolidation of, you know, the cable business was exploding, and in fact the direct-to-home satellite business was exploding. And so that was right when DirecTV started.
So had TBS and made the Braves a national brand.
Big time. And he was launching Turner Classic Movies. He had CNN had been on the horizon, CNN International. It just became this explosion of cable. You know, it's when all those cable networks just kind of came into the fore. 500 channels.
Not to make us sound old, but
yeah.
when you say the youngins, you know what CNN stands for? And none of them know?
I know. Well, Chicken News Network, right, first. That's the first one. But whoever came up with that was dead wrong. Yeah, it's
funny how you can make a brand out of anything.
It's so true. And you have enough belief behind making it happen and enough kind of authenticity as to the why and what you're solving in the...
For example, ESPN.
Mm-hmm. Okay, yeah, hold on a minute. I should know this.
Eastern Sports Programming
Network. Yeah, that's right.
But it's become an obviously a huge international brand, and no one knows what it stands for.
Yeah.
NSPN now, right?
Pardon?
NSPN, it should be, not just Eastern, right?
Yeah, that's so funny. I mean, all that.
We should mention that joining us here today is Lisa Sabat, who's our worldly producer of this podcast, and so she makes it all happen. She also happens to be my chief of staff and runs our life and pretty much runs the company.
She's pretty on point. I've met with her before.
Anything that goes wrong, I was involved with. Everything that goes right, she's involved with, working with Patty back in the office.
That seems about right.
I've accepted it.
Yeah, I love it. So yeah, I ended up at Turner as a marketing assistant in the satellite division, which was the kind of like all scale. So launching, you know.
So you and Ted? Just like that?
Rode the elevator with him a couple of times, and then he could tell what floor you were getting off of, and he would say, "How are those Cartoon Network numbers?" And everyone would be like, "Oh my God, just get me out of the elevator." Because you know, our floor, he knew what we were launching. It was just, he had his finger on the pulse of the time. It was kind of cool, and it was a great way to just cut your teeth on media. And actually, because like anything, you're, you know, much like startup world, you're involved in something at the really beginning, and you get a chance to have exposure. Yeah, and I did. I mean, this is probably ill-advised now, but I was negotiating contracts with smaller distributors, you know, when I was 23 years old. I don't want to go back and look at what happened there, but luckily I had a good legal team behind me. But I think it's kind of like, well, we got to get this done, so let's go.
It's funny, like in politics, which you thought you'd be original world, there's a few fields, social services, you get an opportunity at a disproportionately young age for major responsibility because no one else is there.
It's true. You know? I mean, I always love that about the startup environment too, because I feel like that's all hands on deck, and you do get there's a lot of burnout, right? And there's a lot of other things that come with it, but I think it's great when you're young, and I loved it. I embraced it. I was there for 3 years, got a lot of opportunity to work on different things in Atlanta, and again, exploding, launching platform after platform, and then really wanted to move to New York. And so I worked for about 6 months. This is, I mean, I sound like a dinosaur, but no internet, naturally, and it was the back of multi-channel.
What is this thing, internet?
Believe me, I had to look over somebody, I think I told the key to the story, I had to look over somebody's shoulder to figure out a fax machine also, because I didn't take any business classes before I got out of college, thinking I was just going to write on a word processor. Anyway, ridiculous. All ridiculous, but we figured it out. But I looked at the back of the multi-channel news magazine for like things, and I found out through a contact that HBO was looking for someone that was actually in the satellite division too, you know, working on marketing and contracts and affiliate relations for those distributors, and got an opportunity and moved here in 1995.
Oh, terrific.
Yeah, and
of course, while you were at Turner, they had an enormous branding event that really solidified CNN as a real go-to news source.
Baby Jessica and Will.
Persian Gulf War.
Oh, okay, for sure. Yeah.
And Bernard
Shaw.
Yeah. Holding a microphone out a window.
That's right.
In Baghdad, of a hotel or something that he was in, as the bombing started, the shock and awe bombing. Wow. Really, so back at that time, they were getting 1 share at most.
Easily.
And then they went to getting a 34 share.
Wow. So that ended in 90. 91, right. So that was before I wasn't there for the frenzy of that as a working person. I certainly was as a viewer. Actually, I think because I was still in college, I listened to now I'm going to really sound like a dinosaur. I know I did. I listened to the Gulf War on the radio.
What is this in the radio?
Yeah, exactly. Which I actually kind of found soothing and less anxiety driving to hear it in audio versus watching it on the news, because I just felt like that was, anyway. But when I got to CNN and a little bit later, one of the second moments of definition was the baby Jessica in the well.
Mm-hmm.
And yes. Right? And that was how all of a sudden nationally people could have access to this horrible thing that was happening. And in many ways brought the country together, but in many ways you can understand what a massive change that was in the landscape of understanding the reach and relevance for networks and also viewers and what they considered their sphere of influence,
So you bounced around the media world for some time?
Yeah, well, I was at HBO for 4 years, and then I left to go make millions in the internets.
Did that work out?
I don't think that worked out too well. That's my dad. He was like, oh, okay, that didn't. But, it was right around 99, and there was all the startups were launching, and people were, and I went to work on B2B marketing at a place called Flus.com, which was online stored gift dollar platform. So it was like online gift currency that you could actually use as a form of payment on the merchants. So actually we had to deal with $1-800 Flowers at a time.
Oh, did you?
Yeah, we did. You guys were one of the first on, in fact, if I recall that right. And it was just, so you could pay with Visa, MasterCard, or Flus. And it was, it's like a stored value platform, that's what they called it. So I did that, and then did a couple of other startups with some folks, trying to, pitch VCs and lost our term sheet, all the things that you do during that time. Ended up back at HBO in 2003, and then I was there for 9 years.
How'd you come to comic relief?
I left Condé Nast, so I was at Condé Nast, so, a couple different stops along the way, and...
Always media?
Always media, yeah. It was Condé Nast, HBO, NBC, Universal, Daily Candy, which is the women's lifestyle brand, digital.
Was that Candace Carpenter?
Actually, no, it was Danny Levy started that originally, and then it was acquired by Comcast Interactive Media and Amy Vance on that side, which then acquired NBCU. So NBCU held it, and so I was there at Daily Candy first, and then went to go on TV everywhere at NBC Universal, SoundCloud, and then Condé Nast. Right. So when I left Condé Nast in November of 2018, and sadly my father, I was quite close to it, passed away about a week after. But he saw that I left, and that was probably a good thing, and we had a cocktail together for that, so that worked. And then I just decided to sort of think about what I was going to do for a little while, and just networked and all that jazz, and just took my time. I mean, I'm such a worker, to be honest, that I'm not very good with downtime, and my normal path would be like, okay, let's get something and let's go. And that was the first time that I really, because it was a life-shattering event in many ways,
sure.
Kind of took a pause. And so I consulted with TPG Growth on what is now Airmail, Graydon Carter's newsletter. It's been amazing. It's a great platform. And then Puck. It wasn't called Puck then. John Kelly, who was the brainchild behind that, was called Newco at the time, and we're helping him on some of that. And that's burrowed into a really amazing platform too. He's brilliant. Worked there, and then with Human Ventures, Joe Marchese and Heather Hartnett's organization, and just really working on some very innovative things. So I got a call. I loved doing that, but I kind of wanted to be in an operating role, and I loved doing all of those things. And then got a call from Russell Reynolds about comic relief, and I to be honest, was like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I have like major imposter syndrome. When you look at Kevin Ryan, who's the former CEO of Covenant House, or Claire Bognow, who is the CEO of Feeding America, both organizations that we support, or Cheryl Dorsey, who's the CEO of Echo and Green. I mean, that is a committed day in, day out on a programmatic level to serving work in that space, right? And I thought, wow, what's the arc for me to get there? But my friends at Russell Reynolds were like, you need to come and talk to Richard Curtis. he is the founder, and you need to understand what is the difference between comic relief. And I knew because I had worked at HBO for 1 million years ago, obviously, and I knew what comic relief was.
And that's so they did the specials, right?
Yeah, and it was a different, so Richard started comic relief in the UK in the late 80s.
And he's a comedy writer.
He's a everything writer. He is a rom-com. I mean, now he would roll his eyes if you hear me say that. But he wrote Mr. Bean way back in the day, right? He wrote Four Weddings and a Funeral, Notting Hill, Love Actually. He's the screenwriter for Yesterday. He's actually now working on a rewrite of Bernard and the Genie, which was a show that he had done in the UK. I think it's a huge cult favorite. He's redoing it now for Peacock, which will air later on in this year. So he is a writer, multi-hyphenate, which is super interesting, but that is not the most interesting thing that he's done.
And how did you get the idea for, hey, we need to do something here? I know it was a trip to Africa.
As I understand from him, what can I do as a creator? I'm a maker, I do these things. You feel kind of helpless in a world where you see that kind of devastation, and came up with the Red Nose.
And you think, what are my skills? What can I do with these to make a difference here?
Right, and when you look at that Red Nose for Red Nose Day, it kind of is absurd. You're like, what? I mean, I remember this when we introduced it at NBC. I was working at NBCU, and NBC became the partner.
And how did that become a part of comic relief, the Red Nose?
I think just Richard coming up with something absurd to capture a moment of laughter and absurdity, and I think on a psychological level, which I'm not sure he really came at it that way. He came at it like, let's just do something.
Break the ice.
Yeah, break the ice. It really does break barriers.
Yeah.
And for our purposes...
And how did it become so identified with comic relief?
In the UK, Comic Relief and Red Nose Day almost launched kind of close with each other. And then there was a sort of interesting approach, and you can do this in the UK much more easily than the US. They were kind of in all schools. And so it really became part of the school curriculum, and you would do fundraising with the school and so you talk to any Brit of a certain age, and they are, and it is like, they understand what Red Nose Day is. It is a part of their whole recognition of how to drive change for others and recognition of something outside of themselves. So it launched in schools, and then it was the national broadcast, BBC. So between the broadcast reach of BBC and the kind of really grassroots level at schools, that's how it became. And it just became this synonymous piece. Now they do...
And it started as part of comic relief?
Yeah. And so in the US, at the same time, in the late 80s, although I think Richards started comic relief in the UK a little earlier, but Bob Zmuda, who was a guy that worked with Chris Albrecht at HBO, started comic relief and the idea of comic relief on HBO, but from a showrunner's perspective, kind of like somebody who's kind of, creating a show and understanding what that can do, and very deeply rooted in the comedy sector specifically, brought that to HBO. HBO eventized it, and then for the first time, and I remember watching this in the late 80s on cable, you have Whoopi Goldberg, Robin Williams, Billy Crystal up there.
When I think of Red Nose, I think of Robin Williams.
Yeah, well, and then there's Patch Adams, right? That has an odd connection that's completely not related.
Coincidence.
Total coincidence. Because U.S. Americans remember Robin Williams as part of comic relief. When you hear comic relief Red Nose Day, then it also automatically goes to Robin Williams with Patch, and but I'll claim it. So that's how that got started. In the U.S., it's interesting, when Richard came to launch Red Nose Day in 2015 in the U.S., he officially acquired the name Comic Relief in the U.S., which had sort of gone a little bit dormant, but then did not relaunch Comic Relief brand, launched a whole new brand, Red Nose Day, which is really, as a performer and marketer, I thought that was super interesting.
Yeah. Not something you might have advised.
I would not have. I would have absolutely gone but this is how you know creative genius when it comes around. It was the right, in many ways, given the partners of Walgreens, NBC, and Mars at the time, and the understanding of what they had built in the UK, which was a moment in time in a retail environment or in a broadcast experience where this Red Nose is used as a tool to kind of help people understand that there is good to do in the world. Contemplate it for a few minutes and then act.
Yeah.
And that interesting arc between, and I've read lots of things about decision making and donation and all this stuff, but one was from an Accenture study of 8 seconds between inspiration and action. And I love that, because one of the things in a retail environment is that you have, maybe 10 seconds you're in line, and then you come to the point of, the purchase point, and it's like...
Do you remember when there were lines?
Oh, I know. Well, now I'm making my own line because I can't understand the self-checkout.
You're closing a backup.
I am. Oh my gosh, it's embarrassing how not intuitive that is for me.
We put our heart into everything we do. We are farmers, bakers, florists, and makers who grow and create with a passion. Made with love at every step of the way. Because at the end of the day, we know you're sending more than a gift. 1-800-Flowers, share with love.
So, you get the comic relief, the whole association with Red Nose. You got this partnership with HBO in the early days.
Yeah.
Walgreens continues.
Yeah.
What were you asked to do
So,
when you took over?
Yeah, I think the idea was that they really wanted to expand to work on a strong Red Nose Day and how we kind of bring new partners into the environment for Red Nose Day. I think in many ways the same three operated in the same way, not in an old way, just that became the three were only. April and May only, not necessarily a sense of year-round. How do you anchor to, much like 1-800-Flowers does, key moments and
yeah, that's why we invented Mother's Day and Father's Day.
Valentine's Day, right?
We invented them all.
I mean, it is like, that is where there are moments where there's certainly holiday. I mean, when the giving cycle, the holiday time is a huge time for giving. So expanding that and then expanding to new, I'm just going to use the term franchises or new kind of ways to fundraise. And because we fundraise so specifically for individual donors, right? So it's almost in many ways, and we're going to do an amazing collaboration with their team, and that's exciting. It's like a co-marketing campaign.
Well, we'll see how this goes.
Oh, yes. But it's exciting so far. It's like a we fundraise like a co-marketing, plan, which is why this role to me was so, I could bring all these years of 20 some odd years of media experience to this.
Yep.
It's not that dissimilar with figuring out a way to activate and engage, to drive a subscription, to drive e-commerce, to drive a product sale, but doing it, your messaging needs to be tight and succinct. You need to invoke an emotional response, and you need to invoke an action.
Yep.
And from my end, on the partner side, it's not a huge investment on the part of the partner in the sense that it's really fundraising from consumers.
What is it you are raising money to do, and how does the consumer know that?
Poverty is our sort of singular space that we focus in, but when we break that down, we've been focused in it's like a layer cake. The first thing that we really have focused on in the last few years is intergenerational poverty. Mm-hmm. And I can tell the journey as to how we got there, but that's been a very specific and deliberate intention on our part to kind of change it to intergenerational lens in which you think about children. Red Nose Day really is focused on support for children living in poverty, but when you start to think intergenerationally, you think about what has happened in really generationally, again, in the family or caregiver. You think about communities, you think about systemic and long-term issues that have happened in communities, certain communities versus others, and then you solve problems differently that way, through that lens. The four pillars that undergird our kind of work are around safety, health, education, and empowerment. So all the 50 grantees that we grant out to, they fall along one of those four verticals in some regard, but increasingly there's much more intersectional work, right?
Lisa and I was surprised in the last several months to learn from a friend of ours who runs a healthcare system on Long Island. And Long Island's a fairly affluent area, it seems to me. A friend of ours runs a Catholic health system. His name is Dr. Patrick O'Shaughnessy. And with our charity, which is called Smile
Yes.
we create work opportunities for people with disabilities, primarily developmental disabilities. And what we've migrated to is we grow a lot of products. So we start out with creating agricultural type of jobs and career opportunities. And we started growing flowers and plants, and we still do. but we've added a lot of food stuff now because
Yeah.
our restaurant friends are so good at helping us to create job opportunities, and they say, hey, if you can grow me microgreens, I'll buy it.
I love it.
All you can grow because they don't ship well, it's not a
Yeah.
long distance thing. And so we've been working with the Catholic health system, and Dr. O'Shaughnessy told us that 40% of the people who present at one of his 6 hospital emergency rooms are food insecure or hungry. And we found that astonishing.
That's,
So we just created a farm at a mental health center for the Catholic health system that they just developed. And we created gardens so that people who were there for treatment or therapy of some kind or another now have the option to go out and work in the garden,
Yeah.
just to spend some time or work as part of a program, which, if you've done it, is kind of therapeutic in and of itself. And we're growing foodstuffs there that we're now using in his hospital. So he created a very discreet program where the clinicians, if they suspect there's a food issue there, can, upon discharge, give the person a go bag, which has good and nutritious food in it for
that's
them.
great.
And so now we're turning our production at Smile Farms to grow more and more food products for them.
I love that. That's great.
But when we talk about food insecurity, most of us think, I wonder where in the country that is.
Yeah.
And what I didn't realize is it's all of our backyards.
It is. And I think, when you start to dig into, which I know you have and your team has, just in the idea of a food desert and, the things that you take for granted in your own space and what you have access to and what you can, like not being able to find fruit because it's not offered within a place that I can get to. That's not, that.
But see, it sounds like we can easily say that, say those bad markets, they'll tell you, if I put fruit in here,
yeah.
it goes bad, no one buys it.
Right. Well, then you kind of take a look at the economic environment around, and so it can't be sustained, from a capital side, and this is, but there's other statements that go along with that too, right? Just how communities are suffering together. There's a lot of program support for education, housing, food support for really young kids. You get to be about 18, and then there's
Desert.
and that is a problem.
Yep, it complicates itself because then it develops a mental health problem.
Absolutely. And I think the last mile is also crucial. And I think of many kids who have excelled and gotten to that certain point, or at senior year, and need that other kind of connective tissue to sort of get to whatever workforce they're joining and whatever. And that's important. And we have lost a lot of that support. Government, local, whatever you want to say, a lot of that fabric has been lifted out, and we think it's super important, and I can see that in the work that's being done and the organizations we fund.
100 years ago, I worked in the social services and worked at a home for boys, and this is, when I say 100 years ago, practically was, and back then the city would fund congregate care.
Yeah.
And I think we had a bunch of really dedicated people that did really good work. So we had a few hundred boys. And we'd have them for a while. We'd have some kids for a month. We'd have other kids for years. And the kids we had for years, we made a real difference in their life. The toughest time was the discharge.
That's right.
Where did they go? There was no family infrastructure, but it wouldn't be with us.
Yeah.
And you don't get reimbursed for that.
No.
So we fundraised to fund that effort. How do you get them set up in their first apartment?
Yeah.
Because when you see homeless people, you think, how do these people become homeless?
Yeah.
It can happen
Easily.
A health issue, it's so easy to slip into that.
Yes.
And then so hard to get out.
So hard. I know.
We got involved with a charity in your adopted hometown of Atlanta. This lady Molly, she and her husband started a charity called First Step, which is to get people who are homeless to get their first job. So that requires showers, clothing, hygiene products, etc., transportation to the job to get them out. But it's such a difficult step to fund, to manage, and we had it with all boys being discharged. But when you did get them set up, then they were on a good path.
Yeah. Oh, that's.
It was all about having a job.
Yeah.
A reason to get up in the morning.
Right.
And come home tired at night.
Right. I know. I mean, I think some of that good work that Molly and her team have done, I'm sure they run into also what becomes more the intersectional piece, right? The mental health issues and, you know, and
They're dealing with it all.
Right, and I think, you know, shower, housing, home, ride, job is a great linear trajectory, and there's so many folks who are going to be waved off the path because of many mental health issues too. And I think that, yeah, I'm sure she's had to, and their team has had to balance for both.
So the Gates Foundation is well known for only funding things where they can measure the impact they're having. Mm-hmm. How do they measure your impact?
They're very interested in, at least, you know, and continue with us. So we're kind of talking to them about our roadmap and thinking about what we're doing next. And so the genesis of our partnership is really the giving by all and the understanding of how you galvanize the public to act. They're extremely interested in and you know, the longer I'm in this role, the more I realize how very unique it is what we do. I think in many ways it's quite hard because we're not supported on an endowment. We don't get big checks from CSRs once a year. That, you know, we really are raising from the public.
How much money do you raise a year?
Around $50 million.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah.
Alison, I think I read that you've already raised $41 million.
That's right.
In the Red Nose campaign for this year.
That's right.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and that's, thank you.
Would you stop butting in?
Part of that is, I should say, done through, it's not all public donation, it is fueled from public donations as the lion's share. Yeah. There is a match that we are able to kind of work through because of the momentum that happens on the public donations, and that, so that happens in the aggregate, but they're intrinsically tied. And I think that, you know, that's what Gates is interested in. Like, how do you move the needle in an environment where it's, first of all, we're just all on these devices, and you know, and again, borrowing the mindset of commercial sort of marketing and engagement, like, how do you break through? And how do you break through the message that moves people? And so and then once they do break through, how do you make sure that you can communicate what it is that you do in a way that's material and fosters re-engagement? And I think that's what interests Gates. And so we can talk to them about the KPIs on the front end, what those numbers look like in terms of donations and all that kind of stuff. And then we can talk to them about the back end, which are, you know, I don't like to use this term, but it is the impact numbers, you know, that happen through our partners.
Peter and Alison, being involved with Comic Relief, you must have some sense or point of view about the science of laughter.
I think we practice it probably all day long in the office. It's not perfect all the time in the office, but let me not
of course, we imagine that you wear your red noses.
Well, we did, but we're not here.
You're undercover.
We took it off beforehand, naturally. You know, I think it's just proven that laughter breaks down barriers no matter what. You know, and even if I'm just talking to you and I just met you and we share a laugh about something because the elevator was something, you know, and I never see you again because you're in the elevator, it is a moment that has all kinds of psychological benefit, even if momentarily, and then it moves on. Physiological benefit. Mm-hmm. I think in today's climate and culture, what better than to have a minute of laughter? Whether it's a minute with a red nose, whether it's a comic relief event, that we can bring joy, levity, laughter, and bring community together. I think that is the idea that we can come together for a common cause. And people do that for a lot of causes, right? There's a lot of organizations that pull people together, and I think that's awesome. But a common cause with laughter and a little bit of kind of, I'm going to say, cheekiness as part of it, it carries with it those psychological, physiological benefits, even momentarily.
Babies laugh.
They do, and then we laugh with them because it's
what's
just
funnier.
Human. Yeah. It's a human physiological response, and I think that's the, you know, we just want to seek moments where we can do that.
And it's funny, we can all do the science. There's a couple of comedians I was sharing with Patty and with Lisa, a couple of comedians I've gotten to know in the last 6 or 12 months that I only know from YouTube.
Yeah.
If I'm watching them, I'll smile.
Yeah.
And I might giggle a little bit. But if my wife is in the room, then I'm laughing.
Yeah.
And if I'm in a crowd, I'm laughing loud.
Yes. Yes. Well,
shared experience.
Yes.
It is.
What is that phenomenon?
I know. I wish I had the sort of data stats or the kind of like good science background to give that what that is, but I just know we know it happens because it does, and I can see Even my husband,
Even he laughs?
doesn't belly laugh all the time, but man, when he does, my daughter and I both are like, what? Where the whole room is, and it really is infectious. My dad, we used to have a joke about that, my brother and I, you knew it was funny if my dad showed his top teeth. It's funny, there's a woman that we brought with us down to South by, and we did a whole kind of Breaking the Boys Club, which was really having female comedians come in and tell a little bit about their story and how they get started, and kind of from a women's lens. And so Joy L. Johnson, you should check her out. She's a former teacher. She's like, well, I left that. She went from like an under-resourced school to a way over-privileged school, and she's like, okay, I've seen both sides of it. And she's just like super natural and great and warm, but funny. And I think, for us, with Red Nose Day and with Comic Relief, more so Red Nose Day, because if we're going to talk about humor and funny stuff, and it's children are involved, we need to make sure that, the funniness is within the right vein. Comic Relief, we might be able to do like the after 8 p.m. crowd, still with him.
Jim McCann works clean.
Yes, he does. And it's funny.
So does Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah, many do. And you don't need to be non-clean, we'll say that. And you also don't need to punch down, And I think there's just been, we don't need to be participating in a culture where we're, othering other folks, There's a lot of funny stuff that you don't even need to go. And Seinfeld's a great example of that, frankly.
And if you want to watch something funny, watch comedians in cars getting coffee.
Oh, God.
And then Seinfeld and Gaffigan.
Yeah.
And you can see they respect one another.
Yeah.
And they're both workers. What I mean by that is they're not ad-libbing a lot. They really do work their material.
That's right.
And you hear them talking about it's really great insights and just funny as can be to watch.
Yeah. The other two women that we had on our panel at South by was Sam Ray and Abby Jacobson, who they're just brilliant. And watching them sit and riff and and give space to each other,
Yeah.
I mean, that was, I don't know, it was great. It really did, and the whole room was involved and invested. Now it's my job and our job to kind of turn those into moments where we can raise for fundraising too. Right?
So for those, we have lots of people in our audience, in our community who are in business or run businesses, in marketing. What should they be thinking about in terms of how they might work with you?
One of the great things about, actually both Red Nose Day and Comic Relief, but I'll speak about Red Nose Day really quick, is that if you are a business, if you're a platform, you are running an XYZ with customers and frankly, team members, folks that work on your team and your support staff and whoever that is that are interfacing with customers. And then the third element are product customers, The red nose is so malleable that it can be part of your campaign. And for us, to create a way to we have to leverage the scale of others, For us, we really need that. And what we bring in return is the assuredness that all the dollars are going to the place where we say they're going with all the tracking. The idea that you're supporting children. The idea that you're supporting children around poverty, which is the #1 SDG. And looking at all the different things, safe, healthy, educated, empowered, but all the intersectional issues with there's some intersection between what the organization wants to do and what we offer. And I have a team of people who can make it come alive in storytelling, in narrative, in marketing. And that in exchange is just expose your customers to it, get your team members behind it, rally your product partners. It's not an exchange of money, it's just an exchange of environment,
Alison, how do you as an organization build those relationships with other brands, people, comedians, celebrities?
It is so I have a talent entertainment team that works on, talent engagement, cultivation. A lot of that is through our relationships that we've had over the years and with Richard and so on. We do work with UTA. They are just a fantastic partner and a conduit to figuring out partners there. On brands, it is, it's like everything I've ever done in my life, but at a high velocity, because as like anything, 1,000 conversations turn into 100 possibilities, turn into one opportunity. And so we tend to go to places where we can speak with a loud broadcast, right? So we were in Cannes this year, which was great for the the Cannes Lions Film Festival, and it was, I mean, not film festival, the ad market side, and it was just, we had 4 panels and met with a ton of different brands and talked about Red Nose Day and Comic Relief and figuring out how to co-create something in their space.
Yeah.
So it's really, we need to get into
You didn't go yacht hopping, did you?
Oh, no, I did not. I was actually like grossly beach bound, but you know, I think when you go to a place like that and you are privileged enough to be there as a nonprofit, you better just make that work. So we stayed in an Airbnb and did all the, you know, just to, and hit the ground running. And we came back with a lot of great folks who were like, how can I help?
And what's your relationship with Richard and the UK organization now?
Yeah, we're a sister organization. So there's a CEO, Samir Patel, who is over the UK side. We both have separate boards, board chairs, and separate covenants just because the fundraising happens in both of those different places, and we grant out to different places even though our work is aligned. There is some shared places of granting, but most of it's separate. Richard is our spirit animal? Sure. I'd be like, please don't ever...
Spirit animal.
Please don't ever call me that again. I'm a spirit leader. I meet with him twice a week, and he is on our board as well. And, you know, I think I see him as our creative North Star.
And what's he working on professionally now besides Red Nose?
So he's working on that movie with Melissa McCarthy and called Bernard and the Genie. I haven't seen it yet, but I'm sure it's just going to be delightful and funny because of the people who are involved. He also, you know, this is where you talk to Richard and it's like, oh sure, the actor, writer, screenwriter, he's not an actor, but a screenwriter, you know, wants to do good. No, he really, not only did he start Comic Relief and Red Nose Day, then brought Red Nose Day and Comic Relief to the US. He is also a UN delegate and works very closely with the UN on global goals. Started an organization called Project Everyone, which works with brands at a much more kind of SDG level, less fundraising and granting and more kind of intervention from the SDG side. He just started something in the UK called Make My Money Matter, which is around changing the portfolio, your pension portfolio, for sustainable investments versus non. I was like, why don't you come over here and let's talk about that with 401ks. He's like, I know nothing about 401k. It's like, all right, fair enough.
So now you've had exposure to it, so answer a question I don't know the answer to, which is, where else is philanthropy a part of the culture? Obviously, it sounds like it is in the UK.
Yeah.
Is it around the world? Does it take different forms? They not think of it as philanthropy? Is tithing a part of some cultures and not others?
You know, I'm always struck when I'm in the UK of just how embedded, and I would call it that too, tithing and giving is into the culture. It just is at every nook and cranny, and you can see where that grassroots movement got really started through Red Nose Day in the UK.
You mentioned that it started in the school system.
Yeah.
How did that come about, and how are we able to transition that over here and get that idea of giving in Red Nose Day in our school systems?
I'll be honest with you, I am jealous of how they were able, you know, to do that in the UK for two reasons. A, they started it in schools at a very different time, right? And I don't know all the ins and outs of the UK school system, but part of the challenge in the US is it's a bit Byzantine, trying to get into whether it's local, regional, right, state level kind of infrastructure for schooling. And then you have charter schools, you have private schools. And 50 states, it just becomes a lot more of a complex thing, and frankly an operational lift to do that at scale. We used to have a partnership with Scholastic, which was our partner to kind of get into schools in some way. We still have a schools program, and we love the schools program. I just wish I would love to just push a button and have it just scale, because the teachers that get exposed to it love it. It's around SEL, social emotional learning. It's around developing empathy. It's around teaching kids kind of the understanding of kindness through lesson plans. It's not fundraising as an option if they want to do it in a more peer-to-peer thing, but it really is more about like connecting with kids.
Well, you're doing amazing work, and it seems like the team is really...
They're great. Don't tell her that.
Well, keep being But people are out there, they have a business, and they work in a company that is looking to get involved in things where they can make a difference. So they can go to comicrelief.org.
Yes.
Good.
And they can reach me on LinkedIn, they can reach us, you know, I mean, if there's and I know you get a lot of big folks that listen to you.
So how many different spellings are there of Alison?
There's only one spelling, right? And that would be Alison. One L. 2 L's is phonetically incorrect, I would think. Alison Moore.
So if they were looking at you at LinkedIn, it's Alison, Alison, Moore, as in Moore.
More, comic relief, yeah. I mean, we're always trying to think about, the end is just the more fundraising we can do, the more exposure, the just more good we can do. That's how it, that's how I see it.
How much fun is it to do the things where you know you're making a difference every day? Huh?
It's great.
Well, congratulations and thanks for sharing your story with us today.
Thank you for having me here
Sure.
and having us here.
Thank you guys
appreciate
so
it.
much.
Appreciate it. Great talking to both of you. What a lovely conversation.
Birthday.
Go to 1-800-Flowers.com.
They have tons of great birthday gifts.
Wow.
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 Happy birthday, baby.
Wow.
Yummy. I got to contain myself.
1-800-Flowers.
Celebrate the people you love.
Well, I hope you enjoyed what you heard, and I know I'll be sharing it forward. I hope you get to as well. Let's keep the conversation going. Follow me along on Twitter at Jim1800Flowers and on LinkedIn at Jim McCann. Hope to talk to you soon.
Thank you for listening to Celebrations Chatter. You can join our community by reaching out at chatter@celebrations.com. And while you're at it, tell us what topics you'd like us to explore here on the Celebrations Chatter podcast. Thank you for listening, and don't forget to share it forward.